23 years. That's how long I've been the disappointment. 23 years of watching my brother Quentin get everything, the praise, the pride, the power, while I got nothing but polite smiles and backhanded compliments. But that day, sitting in the Harvard auditorium, watching my father hand over our family's $75 million shipping empire to my golden boy brother, everything changed. Because a stranger walked up to me, calm, confident, and whispered 7 words that detonated my entire world. Open quote, "They don't know who your real father is," close quote. And with those words, my life split in two. The man I thought I was died that day, and the man I became, the one holding the truth in his hands, was someone they would all learn to fear. My name is Deacon Whitmore, or at least that's who I was told I was for 28 years. Until 3 weeks ago, I was just the forgotten son of the Whitmore dynasty, the kind of family that owns museum wings and summer compounds where names are power and money is oxygen. The kind of family that can make problems disappear with a single phone call. Except me. I was the one problem they couldn't erase. My mother, Vivian Whitmore, 52 years old, flawless in every mirror she's ever looked into, runs charity galas like battlefield campaigns. Every smile is calculated. Every guest, a pawn. Every compliment, currency. And me? I was the tax write-off. The other son, she'd say at events, flashing that $1 million smile that never once reached her eyes. Her diamonds sparkled brighter than her affection ever did. And my father, Sterling Whitmore, the man who claimed he built our empire from the ground up, when in reality, the ground was paved with his father's money and other people's sweat. He's 55 now, silver hair, silver tongue, silver everything. He likes to joke that his hair turned gray from the stress of business. But I know the truth. It wasn't business. It was me. He'd made that joke 100 times at dinner parties. Everyone would laugh. Except me. He could tell you the hull number of every ship in his fleet, but not once could he tell you what position I played on my high school baseball team. Starting pitcher. We made it to the state championships. He never showed up. Then there's Quentin, 2 years older, Harvard MBA, the heir, the hero, the future of the Whitmore Empire. He didn't even try to be the favorite. He was born into it, groomed for it, worshipped for it. Every report card, every trophy, every glowing recommendation was treated like scripture in our house. Meanwhile, my achievements, my struggles, my existence were background noise. But here's the thing about being invisible. You learn to see what others can't. I noticed how mother's smile tightened whenever father mentioned family resemblance. I noticed how father's jaw clenched at every photo where Quentin stood next to him. Same hair, same eyes. Almost. And I noticed something else too, that under Quentin's perfect exterior, his confidence was brittle, like glass. That day at Harvard was supposed to be his coronation, the official passing of the crown. Burgundy banners hung from the archways, the brass band echoed across the courtyard, and every member of America's elite was there to witness the golden child take his throne. Me? I drove myself there in a 2015 Ford F-150 with a dented bumper and a radio that only played AM stations. Parked it between a Lamborghini and a Bentley, both probably owned by kids who hadn't even paid off their student loans yet because daddy already did. My suit, off the rack from Macy's, the same navy blue one I wore to weddings, funerals, and every Whitmore event where my presence was tolerated, not welcomed. The usher looked at my invitation twice, probably thinking it was fake. He guided me to the very last row, so far from the stage I might as well have been watching from another zip code. My parents sat front and center, naturally. Mother in a St. John's suit that cost more than 6 months of my paycheck. Father with cufflinks that sparkled under the lights like stars. And me, just a silhouette in the back row. I should have left. I should have spared myself another humiliation, another night of being the other son. But I stayed. Because somewhere deep inside, beneath all the disappointment and bitterness, a spark still burned. A small, stupid hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd remember I existed. That spark was about to turn into a wildfire, because when Nadira Castellano walked into that room, holding a manila folder that would expose 23 years of lies, I didn't know it yet, but my entire life was about to be rewritten. She moved through that crowd like she owned the air itself. Every step deliberate, every glance calculated. She wasn't there for Quentin. She wasn't there for Harvard. She was there for me. And inside that folder was the truth. See, growing up in the Whitmore family meant living in Quentin's shadow, except his shadow wasn't dark or quiet. It was blinding, a spotlight that erased everything in its glow. Our estate in Connecticut sat on 40 acres of manicured perfection, two wings like two different worlds. The East Wing, Quentin's domain, was a museum of achievement, trophies, plaques, awards, photographs of him shaking hands with senators and CEOs, even a photo with a former president, back when Quentin was crowned Youth Leader of Tomorrow. The West Wing was mine, if you could even call it mine. A handful of participation ribbons, a few team photos where you'd have to squint to find me in the back row. At every family dinner, it was the same performance. Quentin, show Uncle Harrison your Harvard acceptance letter. Mother would beam, adjusting his collar like she was fine-tuning a masterpiece. Her diamond rings threw prisms of light across the room, none of which ever touched me. Then she'd glance my way, that fake, gentle smile. "Deacon's still finding his path," she'd say. "Some people just bloom later, don't they, dear?" Uncle Harrison would nod, pity in his eyes. Slip me a $20 bill like I was a child. They all thought they were being kind. They weren't. At 28, I was a floor supervisor at one of our warehouses in Newark. Not a training executive, not a manager in waiting, just another cog in the machine. My alarm went off at 4:30 a.m. every morning. I drove through the dark to make sure the first shift ran smoothly. My hands were covered in calluses and grease that soap couldn't scrub away. And you know what? I was proud of it, because down there with the dock workers and forklift operators, I saw the truth of our business. The sweat, the struggle, the real backbone of Whitmore Shipping. Father didn't see pride when he looked at me. He saw shame. "Why do you insist on embarrassing us?" he said one night, staring at my hands like they were diseased. "Your brother is about to graduate from Harvard and you're still playing laborer." I looked him dead in the eye. "Someone needs to know how the business actually runs." He didn't like that. Quentin laughed. That smooth, arrogant laugh of someone who'd never been wrong a day in his life. Adjusted his Rolex just enough to catch the light. "That's what we hire people for. Little brother," he said. "Leaders don't get their hands dirty. They have vision." "Hard to see the big picture," I said, "when you've never looked at the small details." Mother's fork hit her plate. "Deacon, please," she sighed. "Let's not ruin dinner with your warehouse wisdom. Quentin's professor says he has the best strategic mind in his class." Of course he did. Quentin always had the best grades, the best internships, the best excuses. Me? I rebuilt engines. I fixed broken forklifts. I earned what I had. But that didn't matter. Not in a family where value was measured in headlines and donations. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, a courier showed up at the warehouse. The envelope was thick, heavy, the kind of paper that smelled like money. Inside, the invitation read, open quote, "The Whitmore family cordially invites you to celebrate the graduation of Quentin Sterling Whitmore, Harvard Business School," close quote. My name wasn't even listed as a host, just a guest. I stood there, surrounded by stacks of inventory and the hum of machinery, staring at that invitation. Eddie, one of the forklift operators, noticed my face. "Everything okay, boss?" he asked. "Family thing," I muttered. He nodded, that knowing kind of nod from a man who understands that family can hurt worse than any physical wound. Because while Quentin learned theories and case studies, I learned people. I knew that Jose's daughter needed surgery and couldn't afford the copay, even with our insurance. I knew that Williams, one of our best drivers, had been sober 8 years, but still went to meetings every Thursday. I knew productivity dropped 30% when the cooling system failed in July. That warehouse taught me more about leadership than Harvard ever could. But none of that mattered to the Whitmores. Because to them, leadership didn't come from empathy. It came from blood. Except that's where they were wrong. Because the blood running through my veins wasn't Whitmore blood. And the truth sitting inside Nadira Castellanos' manila folder, the truth that would make empires crumble and reputations burn, was about to prove it. What she told me that day in the Harvard auditorium would destroy everything they'd ever built. And the best part? They'd never see it coming. Not from the son they'd spent 23 years pretending didn't exist. Not from the disappointment. Not from me. Because When the truth finally came out, the real heir to the Whitmore legacy wouldn't be standing in the front row. He'd be sitting in the shadows, smiling, waiting for the moment their perfect little world caught fire. And trust me, the flames were already spreading. For 23 years, I was the disappointment, the forgotten son, the invisible name on the family Christmas card that was more of an obligation than affection. And yet, on that day, sitting in the back row of Harvard's Grand Auditorium, everything changed with 7 words that would tear the facade of my life apart. Open quote. They don't know who your real father is. Close quote. That moment didn't just shift my world, it detonated it. Because when a stranger hands you a folder that rewrites your past, you realize something terrifying. Sometimes the biggest lie isn't what people say about you, it's what they let you believe about yourself. The air inside Harvard's graduation hall buzzed like static, that particular electricity that only comes when power, money, and legacy gather under the same roof. Mahogany walls gleamed under chandeliers older than the country itself. Every row was filled with polished smiles and diamond wrists, families celebrating their latest investment returns disguised as proud parents. And me? I was in the back row, sitting behind 300 people who mattered more. My name wasn't printed in the program beside Distinguished Family of the Graduate, just guest. A guest in a family I was born into. On stage, the dean droned on in Latin. Nobody understood, but everyone pretended to. A parade of handshakes, applause, and smug laughter filled the hall as honorary degrees were handed to billionaires who probably hadn't cracked a book since the Reagan administration. Then it happened. Quentin Whitmore, my brother, the golden child, the flawless heir. He walked across that stage like he was ascending to heaven. The room rose to its feet as if they were witnessing royalty. Mother, Vivian Whitmore, stood and clapped, her Cartier bracelet sparkling under the spotlights like it was celebrating with her. Father, Sterling Whitmore, puffed out his chest, his silver hair perfectly styled to scream, powerful man in control. The dean shook Quentin's hand with the reverence of a man greeting a future king. And maybe that's what he was, at least in their eyes. After the ceremony came the real show, the reception. The ballroom was a cathedral to excess. Crystal chandeliers, Renaissance murals, waiters gliding through the crowd with trays of champagne that cost more per bottle than my truck was worth. I stood alone in the corner, nursing a drink that burned more from bitterness than alcohol, and watched Quentin work the room like a politician. Handshakes, posed smiles, practiced charm. Then came the sound, clink, the sharp, deliberate tap of glass against metal, a sound that froze the air. When Sterling Whitmore spoke, people listened, not out of respect, out of habit. Open quote, "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have a moment," he began. "Today isn't just about my son's Harvard degree, it's about the future." Close quote. A pause. The kind only men with too much money and too much confidence can afford. Open quote, "The future of Whitmore Shipping International." Close quote. The crowd murmured approval. I could already feel it, the knife twisting in slow motion. Open quote, "It gives me great pleasure to announce that Quentin will inherit everything." Close quote. The applause was thunderous, cameras flashed, my mother dabbed at the corner of her eyes, pretending emotion she didn't feel. And I sat there, invisible, holding a glass of champagne that suddenly tasted like acid and regret. That's when I saw her. A woman cutting through the sea of tuxedos and sequins like a storm through calm water. Navy dress, silver hair, eyes the color of polished emeralds. She walked with purpose, not arrogance, like she belonged everywhere she stepped. The crowd parted for her without realizing it. She stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, sharp, elegant, and haunting. Open quote, "Deacon Whitmore?" Close quote. I nodded, startled. She handed me a manila folder, thick and heavy, like it contained the weight of the world. Open quote, "Your mother's been lying to you for 23 years, she said. They don't know who your real father is." Close quote. My hand trembled around the folder. "What are you talking about?" Open quote, "Open it when you're alone. Everything you think you know is wrong. Your real inheritance isn't here. It's in Miami." Close quote. And before I could ask another word, she was gone. The party continued like nothing had happened. Quentin posed for photographers. Mother bragged about their new Hampton renovation. Father toasted with his business partners, their laughter echoing through the marble room. And me? I slipped out quietly, clutching the folder like it was a bomb waiting to go off. Outside, under Harvard's floodlights, I found my beat-up Ford F-150 parked between a Lamborghini and a Bentley. My reflection in the window looked exactly the same, but everything inside me had changed. I climbed in, shut the door, and flipped on the flickering dome light. Then, with a breath that felt like betrayal itself, I opened the folder. The first page hit me like a freight train. DNA test, dated 2001. Open quote, probability of paternity between Sterling Whitmore and Deacon Whitmore, 0%. Close quote, 0. Not 50%, not 99%, 0. The man spent his life calling me a disappointment wasn't even my father. The next page, a photograph. My mother, young and radiant, standing on a Miami beach beside a man who looked like me. Same dark eyes, same square jaw, same stance. On the back, in faded blue ink, open quote, Vivian and Rodrigo, Miami Beach 2000, close quote. I turned another page. A legal document from Miami-Dade County Probate Court. Rodrigo Castellano, Cuban-American shipping magnate, deceased. His will left everything to one person. Open quote, to my biological son, Deacon, whom I was never allowed to meet. I leave my entire estate, including Castellano International Holdings, totaling approximately $400 million. Close quote, 400 million, my vision blurred. My breath caught. I read it again and again, trying to make sense of it. The warehouse supervisor with grease-stained hands was suddenly the heir to an empire 4 times the size of Whitmore Shipping. But then, the final page. A letter, written in my mother's handwriting. Open quote, Rodrigo, Sterling can never know about that night. He's sterile from his racing accident in college, but he doesn't know it yet. I'm pregnant with your child, but this baby will be raised as a Whitmore. The Whitmore name opens doors. Your money never could. Don't contact me again. Your money means nothing compared to the social standing Sterling provides. The child will have everything that matters. Vivian. Close quote, everything that matters, except the truth, except me. My phone rang, her ringtone, some classical piece she said was sophisticated. I stared at the name, Mother. Open quote, where are you? She snapped when I answered. Your father's about to give another toast. It's rude to leave, close quote. He's not my father, I said quietly. Silence. Open quote, what did you just say? Close quote. Miami Beach, 2000, Rodrigo Castellano. Ring a bell? Her breath hitched. Open quote, or should I read you this letter you wrote? Close quote. Click. She hung up. 23 years of lies and she couldn't even deny it. I sat there, surrounded by the wreckage of my own identity, and realized that every cutting remark, every dismissive glare, every cruel joke from Sterling wasn't just coldness, it was instinct. Some part of him had always known I wasn't his blood. And her disdain? That was guilt. Guilt she wrapped in pearls and perfume. But Rodrigo Castellano, he had known too. He'd known, and he'd waited. And when he died, he left everything to the son he'd never met. That night, I drove straight to Logan Airport. No bags, no plan. Just a one-way ticket to Miami. The ticket clerk asked, any bags to check? Open quote. No, I said. I'm leaving everything behind. Close quote. 2 hours later, I was staring out a plane window, watching the Boston lights disappear beneath the clouds. My phone buzzed non-stop. 17 missed calls from Mother, 12 from Sterling, messages from Quentin ranging from confusion to rage. Open quote. What did you do? Mom's freaking out. Dad's losing it. Close quote. I turned the phone off. For once, I wasn't running from them. I was running toward something. Toward truth. Toward blood. Toward a name that actually belonged to me. When the plane touched down in Miami, the heat hit me like a wave. Heavy, alive, and cleansing. The Castellano International Holdings building stood downtown like a monument to power. 40 floors of black glass and steel reflecting sunlight like liquid gold. The lobby was a temple of marble and silence. Security nodded as if they'd been expecting me. On the top floor, waiting in a boardroom that overlooked Biscayne Bay, was Nadira Castellano, the woman from Harvard. She stood at the window, watching cargo ships glide across the water like giant, graceful predators. Open quote, I'm your aunt, she said simply. Rodrigo was my brother, close quote. I sat down, the leather chair swallowing me whole. She pressed a button and the black wall behind her lit up with a presentation. Numbers, maps, shipping routes. Open quote, your father built something far greater than Whitmore Ship. Castellano International moves cargo through every major port from Miami to Rio. Governments. Armies, nations rely on what we move. Close quote. The numbers on the screen were dizzying. Billions in annual revenue, fleet sizes that made the Whitmores look like small-town couriers. Open quote, 400 million in liquid assets, she said, her voice calm, deliberate. But the real value is in the power, the influence. Rodrigo didn't just build a company. He built an empire that couldn't be ignored. Close quote. She handed me a leather folder, my name embossed in gold. Open quote. Rodrigo knew about you. He tested your DNA himself when you were 2. He's been watching you ever since. Close quote. She tapped a key and photos filled the screen. Me, at my high school graduation, at the warehouse, laughing with the workers, at Christmas dinner, sitting at the far end of the Whitmore table, half in shadow. Open quote. Every year, she said softly, he made sure you were safe, that you were becoming the man he hoped you'd be. Close quote. For the first time in my life, someone looked at me not with disappointment, but with recognition. Blood recognizes blood. And as I stared out that window, watching the ships move like veins carrying life across the ocean, I felt something I'd never felt before. Not envy, not anger, belonging. But even then, a single thought refused to leave my mind. If Rodrigo Castellano had been watching all this time, then maybe, just maybe, someone else had been too. Someone who didn't want me to find out who I really was. And if that was true, the Whitmores weren't finished with me yet. Some truths don't set you free. They shatter everything you thought you knew. I used to think betrayal was something that happened to other people, the kind of thing you hear about in movies or whispered family gossip. But when I opened that folder in a Harvard parking lot and saw a DNA test with my name on it, everything changed. 0%. That was the number that rewrote my entire life. Zero chance that Sterling Whitmore, the man who'd raised me, humiliated me, and dismissed me for 23 years, was my father. And now, sitting in a skyscraper in Miami, overlooking a harbor full of ships carrying my new last name, I finally understand what it feels like to hold power, the kind that once crushed me. But power always comes with a story. So let me tell you how a forgotten son became the heir to an empire, and how the truth didn't just destroy one family, it built another. The day I met my aunt Nadira Castellano, I thought I was walking into a business meeting. What I got instead was a revelation that tore through generations of lies. She stood by a wall of glass on the 40th floor, watching cargo ships glide through Biscayne Bay like kings of the ocean. When she turned toward me, her expression was calm. Too calm for someone about to rewrite a man's entire life. "I'm your aunt," she said. "Rodrigo was my brother." Those words didn't hit me right away. I just learned I wasn't who I thought I was. But hearing it from the sister of the man who was my real father, that was something else. I sat there trying to breathe as she pulled up a holographic presentation. On the screen behind her, numbers exploded like fireworks. Billions in revenue, global contracts, entire fleets of ships. "Your father built this," she said. "He made the Whitmores look like children playing business." Then came the twist that made my blood run cold. "Your mother threatened him if he ever tried to contact you," she said quietly. She had leverage. Political favors through Sterling. She could have destroyed everything he built. I clenched my fists, trying to process the image of my mother, the same woman who spent her life pretending to be some fragile socialite, blackmailing the man who was my real father. Nadira didn't stop there. "Rodrigo knew Sterling was sterile," she continued. "He hired a private investigator who got hold of the medical records from that racing accident at Yale. Sterling was told he might never have children." I stared at her. If Sterling's sterile, then how did my mother explain Quentin? That's when Nadira smiled, not kindly but sharply, like glass catching sunlight. She didn't. "Quentin isn't Sterling's son either." My world stopped. "Your mother had an affair with Sterling's business partner, Harrison Vale, 2 years before you were born." I could barely hear her over the roaring in my ears. Harrison. Uncle Harrison. The man who'd always been around, always praising Quentin, always giving him that look of pride that never reached me. It all made sense now. Horribly, perfectly. But Nadira wasn't finished. She moved closer, her heels clicking on marble like a metronome counting down to war. "Here's the beautiful part," she said, pulling up another file on the screen. 70% of Whitmore Shipping's contracts run through Castellano ports. 80% of their international routes depend on our subsidiaries, and every single one of those contracts has a clause, a very specific clause that Sterling never bothered to read. I leaned forward. "What clause?" She smirked. "They can be terminated within 30 days if Whitmore Shipping is ever run by someone who isn't a biological Whitmore." My heart dropped. "But Quentin isn't." "Exactly." Her voice was calm, lethal. "The second Quentin takes over, we pull the contracts. Whitmore Shipping collapses in months, maybe weeks." I sat there in silence, the weight of 23 years pressing on my chest. All those years of being called worthless. All those times I worked until my hands bled while my brother was praised for breathing. All those nights hearing my father's voice telling me I'd never be enough. I wasn't enough, because I wasn't his. And now, I could erase everything he'd built with a single signature. Nadira slid a Mont Blanc pen across the table. Its gold trim gleamed under the boardroom lights like a blade waiting for blood. "Sign here," she said. "You become CEO of Castellano International. Your birthright, your empire." I stared at the paper, at the space where my real name waited. Then I signed it, Deacon Castellano. The ink was barely dry when Nadira handed me one more envelope. "Your father wrote you this," she said, a week before he died. My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. The handwriting was strong, deliberate, the kind of script that belonged to a man who commanded storms. Open quote. "My son, I've waited your entire life to give you what was always yours. I watched you work while your brother was worshipped. You built character where he built ego. You became a man despite them, not because of them. I'm sorry I couldn't be there, but I made sure you'd have everything in the end. Blood doesn't make family, but it does make heirs. Welcome home. Your real father, Rodrigo." Close quote. I read it once, twice, 3 times, and with every line I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Belonging. 3 weeks later, I stood in my new office overlooking the Miami harbor, my harbor. Ships bearing the Castellano crest moved in perfect rhythm, like an empire breathing. When my secretary buzzed, her voice was calm. "Mr. Castellano, your visitors are here." I knew who it was. Sterling and Vivian Whitmore walked in looking like ghosts who hadn't realized they were dead. Sterling's silver hair was thinner, his shoulders smaller. Mother's perfect face was painted in panic. They looked around the office, the walls of glass, the view of the bay, and I saw the exact moment they realized that their failure now controlled their fate. "Deacon," Sterling began, his voice cracking for the first time in his life. "We need those contracts." "No," I said simply. "You need those contracts. I don't need anything from you anymore." Vivian's mask cracked. "I did what I thought was best. The Whitmore name meant everything." "To you," I snapped. "Not to me. That name was a cage." Sterling stepped forward. "Quentin doesn't know. Don't make him suffer for our mistakes." For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. Then I remembered the nights he told me I was worthless. The mornings he refused to look at me during breakfast. The graduation where he toasted my brother's future and forgot I existed. "I'll make you a deal," I said finally. "I'll keep your contracts for 1 year. But Quentin works in your warehouses. Real work. No suits. No shortcuts. If he lasts a year, I'll renew them. If not..." I let the silence hang. "Your empire sinks." Sterling's eyes fell. "He won't last a month." "Then you better hope he inherited more from Harrison Vale than just his eyes," I said, watching the truth slice through them. Vivian gasped. You know about Harrison." "I know everything. Rodrigo made sure of it." They left in silence, 2 statues crumbling under the weight of their own lies. A month later, I found Quentin at the Newark warehouse, wearing work boots, sweat on his collar, hands blistered from labor. He looked up as I approached. For the first time in our lives, his eyes weren't smug. They were tired. Human. "You knew, didn't you?" he asked quietly. "That you'd win in the end." I shook my head. "No. I just knew being called useless was better than being useless." He stared, his palms blistered and red. "Maybe it's my turn to build something real." "Maybe it is," I said. And for once, I didn't see my rival. I saw my brother, another victim of our parents' greed. Now, every morning, I sit in that same Miami office. I keep Rodrigo's letter framed beside the window. Not for the fortune, not for the power, but for the words that built me back up after 23 years of being torn down. "Welcome home, my real son." Those 5 words mean more than $400 million. Because sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't wealth or legacy, it's truth. The kind that burns through lies, through betrayal, through decades of being told you'll never be enough, and shows you that you always were. The Whitmores gave me rejection, Rodrigo gave me purpose, and every ship that sails from this harbor carries his name, our name, across the world. But sometimes late at night I look out over the water and wonder, if they hadn't lied, if they'd told me the truth, would I still have become this man? Or did it take being broken to become unstoppable? Because one thing's for sure, the story isn't over yet, and the next storm is already on the horizon.